Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Wellness Way video series. My name is Dr. Patrick Flynn, and our topic today that we're going to cover is allergies. Now, there's one main point I want you to understand in this video today, that there is a distinction and a difference in allergies. Now, let's look at today the common practice of allergen testing. You can go into the allergist, the medical doctor, general practitioner, and what they'll do is they'll do the common skin prick test. And we know that a lot of people have had that done because they come and say, Doc, I've had my allergies tested and I don't have any. And what they do is this. They take a little bit of that allergen, they put it underneath the skin, and they look for an immune reaction. I say, Doc, what do you mean an immune reaction? Well, let's give you one of the most common ones that most people know about. Do you know anybody that has a bee sting allergy? In the fact that if they get stung by a bee, they get a very large chronic response swelling to where their lips, their throat, they get very puffy eyes. And even some people get so severe instantaneously that if they don't have an EpiPen to actually reduce the swelling, they could die. It could be a life-threatening situation. That is the most common thing done today for allergies. It's called the skin prick, okay? And what they're looking for is the immune reaction where it's instantaneous, and the term is called anaphylactic. And that antibody that they're looking for in the body is called the IgE. Now, that stands for immunoglobulin E. Now, that is the most common allergy test today. The bad part is this. That's not the most common antibody within our body that responds to things, responds to an outside allergens. Now, we know that person can have anaphylactic IgE reactions from foods, from outside allergens, and that's why they'll test, hey, I'm allergic to pollen, I'm allergic to ragweed, I'm allergic to dairy, I'm allergic to wheat, okay? But when people don't see that immediate inflammatory large response, they say, Doc, I really don't have any allergies. Well, it's not really true. The most common antibody within our body is called the IgG. It's the most abundant one. And what you're going to see, for example, is we're going to test the antibody IgG. Now, the one thing about this, these are even called type 2 allergens or even called delayed hypersensitivities. See, sometimes we get the confusion saying, well, Doc, we're going to test for sensitivities and not allergies. Really, there's no difference. When the immune system, for example, reacts to an allergen that comes into us, what we now see is a very large chronic inflammatory response, and it can either be, for example, anaphylactic or delayed. And like I said, it can be delayed either by hours or days, but there's a response to where there's no massive anaphylactic response, so people do not think they have any allergies. Yet when you test them, they see is what? They see allergies to apples, avocados, breads. We know that is a common allergy. But even, for example, I had a person just even yesterday, for example, as I gave you an avocado. How can you be allergic to an avocado? Well, what happens is this. As the immune system reacts to the substance that comes in, there is what? There is an inflammatory response that's produced. Now, what that does is this. As you're going to see that, for example, is when there is a lot of these small little reactions going on in the body, there can be fatigue, there could be GI damage, there could be brain fog, there could be mental issues that come about. That's why when you look at in the whole autism spectrum, yes, some kids do have anaphylactic reactions, but the most common one that they have is the IgG. Now, that's very distinct. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, just because you have the anaphylactic tested does not mean you don't have allergies. There is different types of allergies. And actually, you really want me to throw a monkey wrench in, and we're not going to cover this today, but not only is there IgE, IgG, there's also what? IgA, IgM, IgD. There's a significant amount of immune reactions that, guess what? Nobody tests for, okay? And I want to step back on that. Nobody medically tests for those. What they do is they stick to the standard IgE reaction. I'm going to give you an example. This just happened yesterday to a patient of mine. We had a child that actually came in here with seizures, and what ended up happening is we know that, for example, that when there is a reaction in the body, the immune system can produce things that affect the brain. Well, we actually started to take care of them, so we see a nice reduction in them. But what happened is, hey, listen, we got to see if there's something else that's triggering the brain. So I said, listen, why don't you go to your general practitioner that actually is helping you with your son right now during the process and actually have them test his allergies. Well, the doctor agreed with him and said, yes, we should test your IgG because that will make a difference on there. And guess what? He couldn't run it. Okay, why couldn't he run it? Because the standard of care only allows IgE. So the doctor said, go back to Dr. Flynn and have him test them. See, it's not a standard of care to do IgG. So therefore what happens is they don't move away from their standards. Yet this is what that child needed. And the sad part is this: if that child did not get that, guess what? We found out that he was allergic to goat's milk. We found out that he was allergic to rice, almond. And so when we look at all these things that he was eating that way, they wondered why that when he was eating certain things, he would trigger and have a seizure that way. Now, the one thing is they didn't want to test these because, listen, they know that if he had a walnut that he would flare up. So that's one thing about anaphylactic reactions. What's sometimes bad about not having your anaphylactic reactions tested is the fact that all of a sudden if you come in contact with it, it could be severe. Well, most people, for example, thank God, don't die. But the idea is they get pretty severe reactions and they know that this antibody jumps up. But we really got to focus on getting your IgG tested. It's the most common antibody reaction that we have with all allergens. And the most thing that I want you to understand is, yes, it can be outside allergens for here. It also could be internal reactions. But guess what? We're not seeing that large reaction. A lot of people step back and say, Doc, I don't have any allergies. But here's one thing I want to leave you on this. If you have a little bit of bloating, like I always call the food baby, where actually all of a sudden you eat food and all of a sudden your intestines swell up a little bit. Now I say intestines because people say, oh, Doc, I'm full. No, you're not full. Your stomach actually sits up here underneath your rib cage here. And there's no way you put enough food in there to cause that to distend out. But what happens is this: all of a sudden you eat something, your body has an inflammatory reaction. You get that large swelling within our GI and it starts to poof out. Yes, it starts to come down, but guess what? You're starting to have an allergic reaction to the foods that you're eating. And guess what? That causes a whole host of health problems. So I hope I got in your brain a little bit about this. Even if you've had these tested, IgE, anaphylactic reactions, do not think that you don't have allergies as they say you did not have allergies. There's other immune responses. Most common one, IgG. Now, on a wholly different video, we'll actually cover the other responses because there's a ton of immune responses. And just from this thought process, think about it. I just listed 5 of the responses that can happen, and most of the time, they only test 1. That's where some of the confusion is. That's why what we do is you go back to the Wellness Ways model. We don't guess, we test. So thank you for watching our video today. This is Dr. Patrick Flynn from The Wellness Way. Have a great day.